Hello and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. I'm your host Steve Smith and I hope you've had a wonderful week. Let's get cracking. This is episode number 54. I'm extremely proud to bring to you Keeper of the Greens once again, which is brought to you by Colin Campbell Chemicals. Colin Campbell Chemicals is a 100% Australian owned and operated company that is a leading supplier of crop protection products for the needs of the turf and broader horticultural industries right across Australia. Not only are Colin Campbell Chemicals Australian owned and operated, in 2020 they celebrated 80 years of being in business since their inception by Colin Campbell Sr. back in 1940 in Alexandria, Sydney. Colin Campbell Chemicals has always had a focus on developing new technologies and bringing solutions to the turf industry. Their product range is a testament to their continued focus into their 82nd year of business as a wholly Australian owned and operated company, with some of those products being produced right here in Australia. If you want to know more about how Colin Campbell Chemicals can help protect your turf, then you need to go to their website at campbellchemicals.com.au or talk to Nadeem directly, whose details are on the website under the Contact Us page. And don't forget to tell them that the Golfing Greenkeeper sent you. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you once again to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast, where we have Keeper of the Green segment. It's Colin Campbell Chemicals sponsored Keeper of the Green segment. I love virtually travelling around Australia and talking to different greenkeepers and superintendents about the golf courses that they're working on, and we hear about their wonderful stories. And with me on the line, without any further ado, I have with me Superintendent of Cranbourne Golf Club down there in Melbourne, in I'm going to say sunny Victoria, because the east coast of Australia has been far from sunny in this last growing season. Nico Douglas, Superintendent of Cranbourne. G'day, Nicholas. How you doing, mate?
I'm well, thanks, Steve. As you know, I am an avid listener of the podcast, so I feel very fortunate to be a guest on here today.
I thank you very much. So, and for anyone listening, I've got some new tech and upgraded tech here to do podcasts. I've sort of gone a little bit more professional. There's some new stuff that's happening, so hopefully it's coming across a lot clearer. Hopefully it's the phone's plugged into the system. This is all, I've got wires and all sorts of things happening here, so I'm loving it, mate. I hope we're coming through loud and clear, which is good. And I do appreciate your time, mate, and certainly for you being an avid listener. I really appreciate that support. Thank you, mate.
No, well, keep up the good work, and I'll continue listening, and you can be sure that I'll be sharing this episode around to everybody, trying to toot my own horn, but no, fingers crossed I do okay.
No, mate, I'm sure you're going to do well. Now, one thing that I will say is that we start this. So this is a new one, and I'm not sure for anyone who's listening. I've got Steve's Super 7 questions is a great way to start this conversation. It's a little bit of a comparison process where you as listeners can compare what people's opinions are on some quick fire 7 questions that I have. And this time it is this is a new revamped version. Like I said, it's Colin Campbell Chemicals sponsored Keeper of the Greens, and these are slightly altered questions. So Nick, you might have heard these ones. I'm not sure when I did the last interview with Simon from Gold Creek down in Canberra. Are you across these, or are these new to you as well?
No, I have heard them before. So, but in saying that, I haven't rehearsed my answers. So we'll just see what comes out.
All right, let's rock on. Let's get on with it. Okay, number 1, mate. You ready to go?
Absolutely.
Number 1, sunrise or sunset?
I see far more sunrises than sunsets, so I will say sunrise.
Very good, mate. Very good. We fired a number 2 quickly. Now, this one is going to be one that I'm really keen to hear along the way. So we go, dogs or no dogs allowed on a golf course?
Anybody that follows me on social media or knows me in person will know that I absolutely adore my little cavoodle Henry. So one of the perks, I suppose, of the gig is being able to take him out on a quiet afternoon. He loves running around, so absolutely dogs on the golf course, provided that your superiors and the members are okay with it.
Obviously, we want to make sure that, but I love the personal opinions here, because sometimes this is, and this is no reflection on the golf courses where any of the people that I interview where they work. It's a personal opinion, and sometimes it will go against the what the clubs and committees and that will allow at their golf club. But I'm curious that there's so many people that have a love of dogs, a love of pets, but certainly a love of dogs, and working outdoors for a living and working on such a beautiful space. And I had a little pup when I was out. I had a little Maltese Shih Tzu cross. I used to call it a malt shit or something. I can't remember what they call what the crosses were. But mate, it's very good. You've got Henry, was it?
Yes, Henry.
Henry. I love it. I think that's a great name. So dogs, you're a fan of dogs allowed on a golf course. Okay, love it. Move
Absolutely.
on. Stripes or no stripes on fairways?
No, I'm a bit of a purist, so no stripes for me.
This is great. I'm loving all these. People will be absolutely loving hearing some of these answers and comparing. I think it's fantastic. Number 4, after a golf shot, do you prefer people to replace their divot or put sand down?
Nah, particularly on fairways down here in Melbourne, being Santa Cooch at Cranbourne and everywhere else that I've worked, just sand is fine for us. I've always found that if you try and replace the divot, it'll just dry out or get mown over anyway, so sand's fine.
Sand's good. Okay, nice.
Yep.
Your favourite grass variety?
I'll say on fairways, because it's predominantly what I've worked with. Santa Cooch grass is pretty darn good. And on greens, I would say bent grass. In particular, I love the A1 variety. A1.
Now, okay, I know this is quick. Sometimes I'm going to dive into these. I know it goes against the idea, but I'm going to do A1. Now, A1's a little bit of an older variety from what I can gather. Where does that love for A1 in particular? Because there are so many bent varieties and they're commercialised brand names and so on. But A1, I'm curious to hear a little bit about that.
Well, I am probably a little bit biased, but at Sorrento Golf Club, where I started my time, and I was there for 7 years, we did rebuild all the greens there with A1 bent grass. But in saying that, I've worked at places like Victoria Golf Club, for instance, where we put down Pure Distinction. And then my previous golf course to the one that I'm currently at, Spring Valley, we rebuilt one green in Pure Distinction bent grass. And then later on in my time, we rebuilt another one with A1, a chipping green, and I thought that the A1 performed better in the time that I saw it. And just from an appearance standpoint, like the Pure Distinction, for instance, is very mono, sort of a limey green, whereas the A1 I love in the winter time. It goes really motley. I just love the look of it.
Yeah. And it does do that. You're right. The Pure Distinction, really, it's almost glowing. It's an incredible, vivid green. It's like some of the dyes and paints you see that go out on some of the grasses. It really is quite amazing. But we won't dive into too much here. We'll get into these other courses. I'm liking the courses you've just name dropped there. So for anyone who's wanting to know more, it is coming. So we'll keep those high shelf name drops to one side in the back pocket. They'll come out later. All right, now, number six is meant to be fast. How long has it taken? 15 minutes so far to do 5 questions. Right, number 6, your favourite bunkers. Kingston Heath, the Magic, the very well-known Kingston Heath. Now, I'm a fan of the beautiful earthy tones and colours of the bunkers at Royal Adelaide, or the very bright, the very pure and almost painted sand of the Australian Golf Club.
No, certainly Kingston Heath for me. I love the Melbourne Sandbelt. I think we get the mix between the American and the UK style of golf course perfectly in the middle there. But in particular, some of the bunkering at the courses, Kingston Heath's a great example, but Kingston Heath for sure.
That's yours. Okay, very good, mate. And the final one, if you could visit one golf course anywhere on this round rock that we sit called Earth tomorrow, which one would it be?
I would have said St Andrews, but I've been there, so
another drop. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I'd love to get over and see Pine Valley in the US. I just love all the exposed sand that they've got there. Something a little bit different.
What? So you haven't been to Pine Valley yet? What's going on?
No, I know it's terrible. But, no, a little bit different to the other US courses that you tend to see with all the the glowing green grass. But Pine Valley is sort of that natural look. They've got a lot of exposed sand. So, I'd love to get over and see that one day.
Very nice, and that is why. Yeah, that is. Well, it's often ranked. Pine Valley is often ranked the best golf course on the planet. So, I suppose if you're picking that to drop, it's either there or Augusta, St Andrews, there's Cypress Point. There's certainly a few out there. Royal Melbourne's is obviously very high. I noticed we haven't dropped that one yet either, but we'll keep moving on. Now, mate, thank you. That's the 7 quick questions. It's already built a pretty good picture of some of your background. Let's get into that. I'm really keen and interested, and certainly let's bring some of that out to the audience, to people listening. Let's hear a little bit more about Nick Douglas, Nicholas Douglas. Nick, which do you prefer, mate? I've got to ask.
I actually get called Nico by most people, but yeah, Nick or Nico's fine.
Nico's good. Nico, let's get on with this, and we'll start at the beginning. Let's hear a bit about your story, and let's start how it's always good to learn, and I really am interested in hearing. And I really enjoy hearing how people get into, sometimes fall into, sometimes really want to be a greenkeeper. How did you get into greenkeeping, and where did it start for you?
Yep, so I've always had a love of sports and being outdoors. I never really was too much of a kid that sat inside playing video games, and in particular I loved my footy and my cricket. So I finished year 12 and I was having a gap year before going to uni to study PE teaching. And I was working some odd jobs, bricklaying and concreting, and absolutely hated it. So
back-breaking stuff, that is, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, quite monotonous. But I saw an ad in the local paper for an apprentice turf manager at Sorrento Golf Club, and I just thought I would enjoy. I don't know what else I was meant to say there, but anyway. No. So, yeah, I thought I'd enjoy that a lot more than slogging it out on a building site. So I applied for it, and I thought I'll just do a year of this apprenticeship and then go to uni, but I ended up staying at Sorrento for 7 years.
So just quickly, and what a great place to start. They're down right on the point there around at the entry at Port Phillip Bay. It's a beautiful part of the world. I've not been there myself to experience the golf course, but it's a great place to start your career. I've got to ask, had you been a golfer? Had you experienced golf? Or is it just that idea of working outside was just, let's try something else?
Oh, I'd played a little bit of golf here and there at the dunes down there. I grew up down on the Mornington Peninsula around the Rye area, so there's quite a few good courses down there. But yeah, no great golfer by any means, but I had played a little bit, so I was familiar with the game, and I just thought it'd be a great place to work, so I applied.
Wonderful. So 7 years, what was 7 years? How did you find, I haven't really asked this question before, how did you find, so 7 years, apprenticeships usually 4, I think 3 at TAFE, including one extra for the prac side before you become qualified. How did you find your 4 years at the one golf club? It's usually often how it's done. Not everyone's done it that way, but how did you find that at Sorrento? What was that like for you?
Probably a little different to some apprentices, but pretty much as soon as I got there, which was December 2007, the club launched into a full rebuild of all greens and green surrounds, quite a few tees as well, and some other odd construction jobs. So it was really full on, and at times I really didn't like it because there was just so much going on, a lot of overtime, a lot of long days, but undoubtedly that's made me a far better tradesman in the end, and I do feel very fortunate to have been exposed to all of that work so early in my career. But yeah, pretty full on.
There's probably something that you don't expect is to be involved in a lot of construction and preparing turf surfaces for play from nowhere. I mean, was there bunkers and things involved, no doubt, and all that sort of stuff as well?
Yep, yeah, rebuilding bunker lips where required, but yeah, certainly the reconstruction of greens, seeing how the profile could be changed, little tweaks could be made on the greens, and then we sodded the greens there with A1 bent grass. We had our own nurseries, which looking back in hindsight were absolutely massive, but so a really cool experience.
That's and a lot to gain, and probably something like you just mentioned there, you appreciate further in your career, realizing, looking back, that you had that experience to gain in the early days. And there's plenty of people out there who are greenkeepers that and certainly that won't experience a lot of that for 10 years plus down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. I've met lots of greenkeepers that have been in the industry just as long as I have, and some of them, never would have rebuilt a green, and probably some have never laid a sod before, depending on where you've worked and budget restraints and stuff at the clubs. But
for sure.
I certainly feel very fortunate to have been a part of that.
Unreal. And I mentioned before how beautiful a part of the world Sorrento is, and it's not the Sandbelt per se of Melbourne, but it's right down that point of the Mornington. It's a sandy side, is it, in depth? I don't know a lot about, like I said, the golf course. It appears it's a beautiful rolling dunescape, but is that what it is underneath?
Yes, it's a sand profile through there, and it is a rolling site. There's some pretty cool natural land movement on some of the holes. It's just a great golf course, and some of the best turf conditioning in the country from what I've seen.
Yeah, and it's always highly ranked. Certainly in the top numbers of the country, Sorrento is always ranked up there, which is great to see. So 7 years there at Sorrento, mate. Where did life take you after that? And did you stay into a position when what did you sort of career-wise and position-wise after your apprenticeship was completed there? Where did you move within before you moved on?
Yeah, so I obviously did a few years after my apprenticeship, being there for 7 years, and then most of my friends had moved away from the peninsula to the city, so I was basically looking for a move close to the city, and I took an opportunity at Spring Valley Golf Club under Dave Phillips, who was the superintendent at the time, and then a few months into that stint, I was promoted to course foreman there, and I was there for another 2 years or so.
Wow. So that's a few years out. Spring Valley, that's a big golf course, is it? I can't recall. Is it?
Yeah, it's in the top 50 in the country most years. So, yeah, quite a good club in the Sandbelt, sort of across the road from Kingston Heath.
Oh, yep. Another name drop. There we go. It's right over. They're coming out now as the career moves on. We're coming out now. But you're right. It's in the Sandbelt there. You've got some very well named and very well established and esteemed golf clubs around you. So I suppose you're in that mix there. Do you start to, get to know other greenkeepers from other courses? I don't know, what's it like at the Sandbelt? I know where I was in the Blue Mountains, you get to know all the guys in the Blue Mountains groups. You know, there was 5 golf courses up there. We all got to know each other. Is the Sandbelt, is it similar, like all groups and regions?
Yeah, and I feel like probably the industry might have done this better 5 or 6 years ago, but we used to get sent off to other courses to help them out if they were hosting pennants or if they were doing greens renovations or had a tournament. So
right.
I had the opportunity to go and do a day or two at a few different courses. So I think that helped with getting to meet lots of other guys and see how other courses were doing things. So it's sort of dropped off a bit in the last few years, but I love it, and I think it's a really good way of exposing yourself to different turf practices and meeting different people in the industry.
Totally, and you see ideas, you hear about ideas, and even if it's not being done at that time, you get to see you as an experienced professional. By then, you've done certainly a few years anyway, but you'll see different details, and you'll be like, how did that happen? Like, what do you guys do to get to that point at this time of the year, or with that grass now, or how did you get it to present this way or feel this way, or, watering, requirements and different grass, requirements and what's involved. You just, in a day, you can learn so much more from another golf course with other greenkeepers, can't you?
100%. Yeah, I think it's very valuable.
It's very good to hear, and it's a shame. I suppose COVID has no doubt put a hammer on that sort of stuff in the short term. Yeah. I'd like to hope that those sorts of opportunities open back up where people share around some of their stuff when they can. Like you said, you need a bit of help from time to time. It's always good to have those extra bodies when bigger events are on, and we'll talk about one of yours that you've recently had at where you are at Cranbourne. We'll get to that soon. So you're at Spring Valley, moved up to foreman, which is third in charge, usually on a golf course. Pretty good steps, pretty good golf course to do with, and a couple of years there in that role.
Yep, that's right. After that, I sort of took a bit of a different route. So I took an opportunity to see a different side of the industry, and I moved into a role as the Victorian and South Australian rep for a well-known golf course accessories company.
Wow, okay.
So driving around, meeting supers, trying to sell them, flags, six cups, all of that sort of stuff.
Cool.
Which, whilst it was great for the networking and seeing different golf courses, meeting lots of people, it was a lot of days in the car, a lot of nights away from home, and
Sure.
I pretty quickly realised that I hated sales, and so
it's not because you weren't good at it, I'm sure. It's just, but you're right. For anyone who's listening that doesn't know the inner workings of the greenkeeping world, it's often referred to as the dark side. Is heading across as a sales rep for a company that services the industry, but it is. I know plenty of guys and plenty of businesses, and there've been greenkeepers that have moved across and all sorts of things, and it is taxing. I think over time, you are on the road. You guys do a lot of Ks, and I know some of the guys in New South Wales, and certainly a region that I'm familiar with in the Central West, and there's a lot of kilometres to cover between golf courses. And Victoria, you've got plenty of regions, certainly if you're doing 2 states in Victoria and South Australia. That's a lot of driving, a lot of kilometres, and like you said, you're living out of a suitcase a lot more than people realise, I think.
100%. And then just the pressure to sell, like I'm a pretty competitive person just naturally. So, on my good days, I felt like king of the world. And then on my bad days, I would really beat myself up for not selling anything. And you just don't feel too good. So, I guess in the end, it sort of showed me that my passion still lay with turf management. So I started putting the feelers out to a few supers that I knew from being a rep. And thankfully, Stephen Newell at Victoria Golf Club threw me a bone and gave me a gig as a groundsman at Victoria.
Wow.
We were just about to close the course for 6 months and completely rebuild it through OCM. So, again, I was part of a huge reconstruction project for the second time in my career.
That's epic, because I went down and Steve was away when I visited Victoria and Melbourne in 2019, I think it was, and I can't recall if that was just. I've certainly visited a few months after, because the greens were all open. I got shown around by the assistant at the time because Steve was out of town, and I got to see Victoria in preparation for. Just post having rebuilt all the greens and the putting surfaces and with pure distinction. And my God, what an incredible experience that was just to see it. It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
Must have been incredible to be part of.
Yeah, just for such a prestigious club in the Sandbelt with such a rich history to close the doors for 6 months and do what they did, it was just invaluable to me being a part of such a massive project, and the proof's in the pudding, as you said. It's just incredible the work that was done there, and I've been back a couple of times and had a look. It's just unreal.
Like I said, mate, that just to see the golf course after that, and from memory when I was chatting with Steve, and I don't want to go too much into Victoria, and I won't say that I'll find out some more information before too long, but obviously Victoria Golf Club is the host of the Men's and Women's Australian Opens later this year, and that was there was a lot of work. That's 3 or 4 years ago now that work was being done, and I suppose you need that lead time to prep for an event that's coming up like that with the Opens on site. I mean, that's a big lead.
Yep, absolutely. So, they had, I suppose, somewhat of a tight deadline, but all the work was done sort of in 5 or 6 months, and then obviously the growing. But I can't remember off the top of my head, but the Oz Open may have actually been rescheduled. I think it was meant to be this year maybe or last year.
Yeah,
anyway,
there was a lot of kerfuffle with COVID and messing dates around, because I know it was meant to go down to Kingston Heath at one point in between the Aussies, and it got bounced. And I know that Victoria have it. Obviously, it's been promoted. But when I was down there chatting with Steve and the assistant at the time, I just seeing it. I mean, that must have been another great experience to be part of that phase.
Yeah, 100%. And then meeting the guys from OCM, Mike Hocking in particular, and spending time with them, trying to pick their brain on all things, golf architecture was just unbelievable. And I'm sure that'll put me in good stead in the rest of my career. Absolutely,
mate. Absolutely, no doubt about that. And so, how long were you there while that rebuild? Were you there during the time of the rebuild in its full in its entirety?
Yes, so I was there for a few weeks before we ripped up the first sod, and then I was there until sort of the first green or couple of greens got seeded. So I didn't see all the growing or anything. I was there for about 6 months, but then the assistant super at Spring Valley had just left, and so I took the opportunity to go back to Spring Valley, and I was there as the assistant superintendent for 3.5 years, with sort of 6 months of that as the acting superintendent late last year or mid to late last year.
Wow. So you've learned a lot. You started out at Sorrento. You've done a rebuild down there. You've bounced around up to Spring Valley into the Sandbelt, gone to the dark side, realised how much you love greenkeeping, come back, been part of the rebuild at Vic, and then you get an opportunity to be the assistant at Spring Valley. Now, I'm curious, what was it like going back to Spring Valley, to a place you'd already been to and worked at, in a position where you've got a bit more, I suppose, authority, a bit more say, and certainly a leadership role in how the golf course is presented? How did that sort of change for you at a golf course you'd already experienced?
It wasn't too bad. Myself and the superintendent at the time, Dave Phillips, we'd spoken, throughout the time that I was gone. We remained sort of good mates, and so going back as the assistant, he was really good about the whole thing, and he gave me a lot of sort of leeway, I suppose, and just sort of let me grow into the manager that I wanted to be, rather than trying to make me any particular way. A lot of the guys that I'd worked with the first time had sort of moved on as well, so it wasn't like I was going back and stepping on any toes. But yeah, I absolutely loved my time at Spring Valley.
To know the team's one thing, to know the course is another. You slide back in, probably like you mentioned. It's a well-worn shoe in a sense. You walk back in, and is it a comfortable fit?
Yeah, I felt reasonably comfortable. I think at that point, in comparison to the first time I was there, I really was certain that this was the career for me, and I really wanted to make a go of it. So in that time, I did my diploma.
Right.
I did things like the Future Turf Managers Initiative. I'm not sure if you're aware of what that is, but just tried to take any opportunity I could to improve myself. Sort of my chemical knowledge, nutrition knowledge got a lot better. A lot of that being me reading at home and just, in general, trying to become far better than I had been prior to that.
And so I don't know the Future Turf Managers one. You might have to just detail that one a little bit for not only myself, but also for everyone listening. So tell us a little bit about that. But you like you mentioned there, you decided that you were going to go head. This was you. You were going to take the opportunity now to be the best that you could, to make this your career. This was it.
Yeah, pretty much. I just thought, I'm getting older. I know it probably seems silly to you, but
no, not really, mate. Older, my body's falling apart at the moment, so I'm starting to realise what old is.
Well, there you go. But basically, I just decided that I need to make a real good go of this and give it my best, and these are the things I need to do. So you asked about the FTMI, as they abbreviate it to. It's an initiative run by Jacobson.
Okay.
So there was, in my class, there was 16 of us chosen from Australia and New Zealand.
Wow.
And you get put up in a hotel with a roommate that you've never met before from another golf course. And then you sort of engage in a 3-day intensive workshop type program, focusing on everything from staff management, budgeting. You hear from GMs. You go and, in our case, we went and looked around Peninsula Kingswood with the director of courses, Glenn Stewart, down there. So
wow.
Fantastic initiative, and I can't recommend it highly enough for anyone that's listening and thinking about going for it. Definitely do that.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds, like you said, what an initiative. What a great way to learn, an intensive way of learning, and hearing from very well-regarded and experienced greenkeepers, and certainly, like you said, you're hearing from other people, other peers that are doing the program as well. That sounds like a really good step along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so. Tell us then, as your time as assistant, and you did mention there briefly, you stepped up to acting superintendent for a period at Spring Valley.
Yeah. So in June last year, our superintendent Dave left Spring Valley, and so I was sort of told that you'll be in charge while we sort of go through the process of finding his replacement. They had assumed it would take about 4 weeks, but then we got hit with more COVID restrictions, so they couldn't do interviews and the like. So that ended up being, it was the best part of 6 months before it was all sorted out. And
right.
I narrowly missed out to Craig, who's there now. And whilst that was obviously heartbreaking for me,
Sure.
I certainly learned a lot in that time. And I'm sure that that experience was a direct factor in me getting the position I've got now.
Okay, and that's it. Now it's welcome to the big stage. Let's talk about your role where you are today. You're as superintendent, as I introduced you, superintendent at Cranbourne Golf Club. So that was a step. And when did that happen? When did you make that move?
Yeah, so I applied for the job in December last year. Interviews took place in January of this year, and I started there in February as the super at Cranbourne.
Unbelievable, mate. That's what a great step. Did you? Well, I should mention to everyone, you and I got in touch with each other on socials, and I was talking to you when you were at Spring Valley. Then you got in touch with me. We had a bit of a yarn. Then you got in touch with me again and said, "Hey, Steve, just letting you know, I've just landed the gig. And I'm superintendent." And I've just gone, "Wow, mate, that's fantastic." And a place like Cranbourne, what a great. It's a golf course and a golf club with a lot of history. It's down in the sort of the probably the southeastern reaches, I suppose, of the Sandbelt. Would that be fair to say?
Yep, correct.
So
that's right.
Right on the edges of what we would consider the beautiful landscape for golf courses, and there's so many of them. You're a little bit east of Sandhurst, I think, and a little bit sort of further northeast of what a Peninsula Kingswood, if people are knowing that region down that southeastern end towards down the Mornington. So tell us a little bit about what being a superintendent at Cranbourne's been like, and tell us a little bit about the club if you can, and some of the bits and pieces that you know, that the likes of, this is the place that you're working for, this is the place you're working at.
Yeah, so a bit of history on Cranbourne just as a golf club. So
I say Cranbourne, sorry, Cranbourne.
It's sort of like the Yanks say Melbourne, and we say Melbourne.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, okay, so it's Cranbourne, okay.
Yep.
I hate Melbourne. I hate people that say that. So Bathurst. When I watch the Bathurst 1000, people go, "We're on the Bathurst 1000." I guess, please stop talking. Just please stop now before you hurt yourself. So it's Cranbourne. I'm glad you corrected. Thank you. People, please correct me if pronunciation's wrong. I'm not from Melbourne.
No. I'll give you a pass on that one.
Cranbourne.
That's okay.
I love it. Right, Cranbourne. Tell us about Cranbourne, Nick.
So in the 50s, there was, I suppose, a large contingency of Jewish people in Melbourne, and they were finding it hard to gain access to private golf courses. So I suppose that's just being on the wrong side of history, as humans tend to be. But so they took it upon themselves to purchase a piece of land, which they did out at the site that's become Cranbourne Golf Club, and they essentially they made what is now the Jewish Country Club, or the Cranbourne Country Club, and it's a bit of a weird one because we the club, the Cranbourne Golf Club, are tenants of the Country Club, so they own the land, and the club is the tenant of the Country Club.
Yep.
But they built the golf course, and it was built by designed by Sam Berriman, who did Huntingdale Golf Club in the Sandbelt.
Wow, okay.
So, and there are some similarities that I can see between the two. But they, to their credit, even though they were sort of persecuted against and couldn't get into clubs, they've never really kept anybody out. So as it stands now, it's quite a diverse community-style golf club, but so that's an interesting way that the club came to be.
And I'll just jump in, mate, because that reminds me, and I live I'm on Sydney's Northern Beaches, as most people know, and that's not far from Monash Golf Club. And if anyone knows Monash here in Sydney, it's pretty much a carbon copy from what I gather, and I haven't looked into too much of their club's history in depth, but it's something that is known that it was basically the Jews were persecuted at the time. They found difficulty getting into anywhere at that time because of obviously what was going on through the world, sadly, and extremely disappointingly as we look back into history. And there was that. If you guys aren't going to let us in, and we can't believe it, that's how you're treating other humans. If you're not going to let us in, well, we don't have a choice, and we love golf, and we want to make it, be part of it. So we'll just have to go. We'll have to go and build our own. And I think that's kind of what happened here at Monash, and Cranbourne's the same, where you've got a group of people who have been told that you're not welcome anywhere. Which, like I say, I still. I don't we shudder at that these days. It really is to look back at some of that stuff. You can't fathom some people were like. It's probably much of a digression in the conversation, but it really is troubling to think that that's what was happening to people at that level. I mean, it's just another human, for God's sake. It's based around that Jewish, I suppose, ownership early in its early history, and like you said, they didn't lock people out from others coming to them, so they've grown.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's all range of people in the membership at Cranbourne now. So they're certainly not persecuting others from coming and playing golf and doing what they love. So it's a really good club to be at.
Very good, mate. And what's your team like there? And I am assuming, and we'll get to maybe a bit of description about the golf course. What's your team like? How big's your team? What's the golf course landscape like as a golf course? Does it have a similar feel to some of the other Sandbelt golf courses?
Yep. So we've got 9 guys on the team. Myself, an assistant superintendent, a course foreman, 3 apprentices, and then the rest of the guys and a mechanic. So 9 in total, which is slightly less than we had at Spring Valley, but still certainly more fortunate than some. And I feel like we get a lot done with the 9 that we've got. They're all pretty switched on and good guys. So in that regard, I'm very fortunate. Very
good.
Sorry, what else did you ask? Sorry, I forgot.
Brain labs. Actually, while you're there, I will sort of say, what was it like? And this is the question that I do ask everyone because I like to hear it. What was it like when after you'd got the gig? Nick, you're good. We want you. You're the new superintendent. You start next week or whenever it is next month, and you walked into the shed. G'day everyone. I'm Nick. I'm the new superintendent. This is where things are. This is how I want us to be moving forward from here. What was that like that first day, seeing the team, talking to the team, and sort of establishing, I suppose, a slightly newer path forward from what had been done there before?
Yeah, so I suppose it was definitely the proudest moment of my professional career, getting the nod to become the superintendent.
That's cool. That's a cool feeling.
Also, probably the scariest. I don't know if you're ever completely ready to step into a superintendent's role for the first time.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say I don't know if anyone's ever. They just go, I'm good. You think you are. You feel you are. And the moment you open that door and walk in, you go, oh shit. Shit, right, it's me, just that cool, I'm good, no worries guys, it's me.
Obviously, getting to know the team and them getting to know me, that just takes time, and that'll happen anywhere just naturally. But I think, as I mentioned before, that time that I was in the acting superintendent's role at Spring Valley undoubtedly helped the transition into my current role, but still nerve-wracking nonetheless, learning a new site, learning new staff and everything that comes with that.
And you're talking about that then, but look, I will say, it's really nice to hear you say it's the proudest moment in your career, because some people might not articulate it that way, but it is. That's the whole reason you've gone for the gig, is to get that job. And it's really nice to hear you say that, because no doubt going home at the end of the day, it would have been, wow, this is unreal. and there's challenges that would have already popped up in 24 hours. You go, I've got to get my head around this, we've got to do this, and, starting to be terribly long of things that you want to wrap your head around and plans you want to make and how you want to work with the golf course to bring out the best and how you're going to go about that with the team. But it's really nice to hear that. What was it like having to learn, and how different maybe is Cranbourne to a Spring Valley, another Sandbelt golf course? How different are they around moving from place to place there?
I see a lot of similarities in the two courses, which again probably has helped. But both sort of coming from, I suppose, they've got that workman-like community feel. They're not one of the big toffee golf courses, so just the feel around the place is sort of quite relaxed, welcoming, and inviting. So for me, I'm a pretty personable sort of guy. That's really helped me. Yep. And then, the same grass on the fairways, the same grass on the greens. So
okay.
There are the similarities there, which has probably made it sort of a touch easier. But everywhere's got its challenges. Everywhere's got its pros and cons. You've just got to do the best with what you've got, I suppose.
Absolutely. So tell us a bit. Let's dive into a little bit of the landscape. Tell us a little bit about what the landscape is, the feel of the golf course. Is it that shrubbery style of some of the sandbelts that we know well, or is it a bit more of a woodlands, golf club style where you've got a lot more gum trees and a bit more eucalyptus around and some of the taller stuff like Commonwealth, or is it that lowish style place? And tell us a bit about your grass types.
Yeah, so in terms of the sites, it's kind of weird. The front nine and back nine kind of feel very different. The front nine sort of plays more as that parklandy style, tree-lined style of golf course. It's a lot flatter, and then sort of as soon as you make the turn onto the back nine, the land just changes, and there's a lot of natural land movement. It looks a lot more like a Sandbelt golf course. So right. I suppose that's reasonably unique.
Yep.
In terms of grass types, we've got Santarana couch grass on our tees, surrounds and fairways. I will say there's some of the better fairways that I've seen in Melbourne, which was one thing I was really complimentary of when I was interviewing for the role earlier this year.
Yeah, right.
The greens and collars are predominantly Pioneer, but there still is some bent grass in there, more and less visible at different times of the year.
Okay.
The greens are mainly still originals, so there's certainly the organic matter to deal with at this stage of their life, but same as Spring Valley, a lot of their greens were 50, 60 years old, so managing them is quite similar.
Okay, that's interesting. So a lot of people that are listening, that are golfers listening, and that they might have an opportunity to experience Cranbourne. You've probably heard me interview other people on the podcast where they have that couch or Santarana couch. Variety fairways, which allows for that running game through summertime. It's a little bit firmer, a little bit tighter. I think it's the most versatile grass on the planet. It's certainly my favourite. And it allows for that through summer. It'll switch off in wintertime. Once you guys start to get those cooler nights down there in Canberra, in Melbourne, it probably starts. It's probably not far away from that. How far away from you getting the cold nights where it's starting to turn off colour?
It certainly feels a bit like Canberra now. Some of these mornings are quite cold. The colour in the fairways is hanging on, but they've certainly slowed down now. And then, as you said, in summer, you can sort of dry them out. You can hit them with PGRs and really tighten them up, and it's just a fantastic surface.
It is, mate. Okay, so tell us why when you said you interviewed for the job and you thought they were probably the best presented and prepared fairways and Santarana fairways going around. What made you say that, though? I'm curious. What is it that you noticed?
Maybe perhaps the best is a bit of a stretch, but certainly I know the budget constraints that Cranbourne's had over the years in comparison with some of the bigger clubs, and for some reason they were just clean, tight, really good density. I was just so blown away with the quality of the fairways there. And it is a reasonably easy grass to manage. It does a lot of the work for you, I suppose, but perhaps they put it in nice and early, and it's just had that time to mature. But Spring Valley has a lot of Santarana in their fairways, and I would say Cranbourne's are better than Spring Valley's. So not sure why, but they certainly are better.
Okay. Very good. Very good to hear. So for anyone who does get the opportunity to go down there and play Cranbourne, you're you've just heard. You've heard from in-house that you're going to experience some really, really good surfaces on those fairways, and certainly, like I said before, it allows for the running game. I'm a bit curious, mate. I know we're heading into winter. It's autumn time of the year that we're having this interview.
Yep.
In summertime, you talked about having a majority of power on your sort of your greens there and your collars. How does that? How do you manage that? Because power does struggle probably more than bent grass in the heat, and you guys get a pretty good heat down there in Melbourne in summertime. This year, let's remove this year, and probably you haven't had the time to experience it, but how might that sort of play out a little bit more? Will that mean that the power needs a little bit more tender loving care through summer? Is that what you're expecting for next year, for example?
Yeah, I think you try and set the greens up for summer as best you can through good management practices. But certainly, I started in February. It was bloody hot in February and even March this year. So the disease pressure just stayed right up. It was quite humid and hot for a long time with no rain. And I just find that as best you can, you need to try and prioritise hand watering over just set and forget the system.
Yep.
Just, sprinkler uniformity, you just can't trust it, and you will run into trouble if you don't spend the time out on a hose. But I've worked with power bent greens for a long time at Spring Valley as well, so I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp of how to manage them.
Yeah, cool.
Haven't lost any yet, fingers crossed. But I'm confident in my abilities and the tech. I've got a great team under me. The assistant's been there a long time. His local knowledge is just unparalleled of the site, so I'm pretty fortunate in that regard as well.
So between you and the team, I think you can only see things improving at Cranbourne. So on top of having those beautiful fairways, you're going to have great putting surfaces, and I think that's a key to be able to present there at Cranbourne. I think it's going to be wonderful that I'm sure you'll be able to with the team bring that out. The best that is possible, and you know what you're dealing with down there in the Sandbelt, so you know how to do it. It's and it's got a great base to do it with. They've been doing it for a while, and certainly you'll be the next page to turn for the club to do it moving forward, which is very good to hear, mate. Tell me a bit about the site characteristics of the golf course. And we touched on that the front nine slightly different to the back nine. Is there much up and down work on the back? You said it's a little bit more hillier than the front. Is there? Do you have like sandy waste areas on the golf course? How does the golf course sort of feel across the board?
Yeah, so almost half and half of the course is split into a sandy profile and the other more of a heavy soil and clay profile.
Okay, that's interesting.
And then, obviously, as I said, the topography, the natural land movement on the back nine, which also happens to be the sandier profile. It's just so different from the front nine. So if you have to dig up an irrigation repair on the course, depending on where you are, it can be incredibly easy or incredibly difficult.
So we know which side of the golf course you're working on the irrigation. I shouldn't say that. You've had a few mornings there now, a few months into the gig. What's a beautiful spot on the golf course that you like at a certain time of the day or something that as a golfer, as a player, and I love talking to golfers as well during a podcast like this because when you get down there to experience it, and we talk about the surfaces and we talk about how you're going to experience good golf down there, what's a beautiful location that we want golfers to stand up tall, put their shoulders back, and actually look around for a minute instead of just chasing the ball and writing down their scores on the card. We want them to look around and enjoy Cranbourne. So what's a beautiful spot on the golf course where you think you can get the most out of the landscape there?
Personally, I love looking down the 16th fairway, sort of from where the fairway bunkers start heading down towards the green. It's a downhill shot. And just that green complex is probably my favourite on the course, but there's quite a few spots, particularly on the back nine, where that land movement is quite dramatic. Anyone that sort of follows me on social media will know that I take a lot of photos out there, so trying to pick one spot will be tough. We've just started creating a sandy wasteland, sort of the shot into the 17th green. That's another sort of downhill shot, and we're sort of attempting to turn that whole left-hand approach shot into the green into that sandy wasteland style, which should look quite good when it's done.
Yep. Is that some of those photos that I've seen on? I think you posted up a couple there on socials. Is that one of those areas that you were talking about, creating the sandy waste?
Uh,
Is
yeah,
that a different
we're
spot?
doing a lot of possibly the ones on social media are not that spots,
Okay.
but we are doing a lot of sort of vegetation work. Probably the one you're thinking of is the 14th T carry, where we've
Oh,
really
that
sort
is
of,
it. Correct.
yeah, yeah, really stripped it back to sand and trying to promote the native vegetation through there as well. So I guess you could call that a sandy wasteland area as well, but sort of a really big one going in on 17 over the next month or two, and that should look great. Sort of
Wow.
going into next growing season.
That's awesome. And you've got like, is it really similar to other of the more well-known golf courses on the Sandbelt Cranbourne side? Is it that you've got a lot of that native vegetation that's there? You've just sort of got to try and bring it out a little bit better. Is that what you're working on when you
Yeah,
talk about the vegetation management?
yeah. So the club engaged Kate Torgerson from Environmental Golf Solutions last year, and
Yep.
she did a vegetation management plan for the club. So we're sort of working through her suggestions from that plan. And then there's a few areas I've identified myself that we've begun working on. So there's so much good native veg at Cranbourne. It's just a matter of bringing it to life and putting the time and effort into it. I just think making good improvements to vegetation on any golf course is a relatively inexpensive way of dramatically improving the course. So that will certainly be a big focus of mine throughout the colder months this year, where mowing and watering aren't taking precedence of your time
Absolutely.
and labour.
Absolutely, and you've got like you said, you've got a reasonable good group of staff. You've got 9 staff there in total to help do the work that you need to do throughout the year. And having those more quiet months where the grass doesn't need tending to as much, vegetation management is so important. And I really do struggle to understand when I hear. And I have heard it, certainly more of the clubs that I deal with in Sydney and people that I know on them and that are part of them, that they don't realise everything's always growing. Everything's always, I call it a moving target. It's a living space. Everything is
Yep.
getting bigger in size, and the course was laid down once. It wasn't there before. So everything else is getting larger, getting bigger. Things are changing. Things are moving. It always needs tending to, and it's not just the grass that needs it. It's the other forms of vegetation. And if you leave it for 10 years or 20 years or even 50 years, it will get out of control. And some of the golf
Absolutely.
courses you talked about, Cranbourne's, what was it, in the 50s that it's sort of come to life. Some
Yeah.
of the courses that I've seen that are 70, 80, 90 years old, some of the trees just really should never have been allowed to start because, 50 years on a 100-year-old golf course, they're in the road and they need to
Yep.
be gone altogether, and that becomes another headache in itself. So it's really important, and I love hearing when superintendents and clubs have identified they need to get on top of their vegetation on the golf course, because not only is it a character for the golf course and a feel for what you're going around and playing in, it's also that some of those things aren't meant to be there. Some of them, it's not their natural environment in that area. They might be native Australian plants, but they might be from other parts of the country that might have been planted there so that they don't work. And golf courses lose character. Golf courses change without moving just because something is sort of reaching in the way, reaching in your eye line, reaching in. So, mate, it's I love hearing that the club and yourself have identified these spaces, and you've got someone like Kate involved as well, that you're identifying and working on managing the vegetation other than the turf around the golf course. Mate, I think that's fantastic, and the club and yourself should be congratulated, and the whole team should be congratulated on having that focus there as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
Mate, I wanna hear a little bit from you, and have you got anything in the future apart from the veg plan over, say, the next 12 months that the club might be looking at that you can sort of tell us a bit about at all?
Well, not in the immediacy. I think the focus, having done the vegetation management plan, that will be the focus, particularly for this year.
Yep.
And then, as you said before, I haven't had a full growing season or summer here yet. So for me personally, just really diving deep into how this golf course behaves, just really learning the site, learning the irrigation correctly, and just tweaking my programs, nutrition, fungicide, just trying to get to the best playing surfaces as I can, because at the end of the day, you are there to appease the members, and that is their escape and their form of enjoyment. So you have a responsibility to try and present the best playing surfaces that you can for the golfers. So that'll be my focus probably over the next 12 months.
Very good to hear, mate. Very good. I want to move on to something that you've recently been part of. You were the sort of the leader of the team behind this event that was there. I don't know if it's the first time it's been held by Cranbourne. I want to talk about the Australian Amateur, the event that was held there. Yep. What was it, last month, or is it end of March? I can't recall exactly. But you'll tell us more. What was that like? And was that your first sort of real big event that you've... Well, it is, because you've only been superintendent really at Cranbourne, without making light of the situation. What was it like in the lead up to that? Short time starting, a couple of months with the team, learning the golf course pretty quickly, getting it prepared for a pretty big tournament. Tell us a bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah, so a little bit of a baptism of fire. I think I had about 6 or 8 weeks from sort of starting there to, the events. So first and foremost was sort of planning my nutrition sort of applications and our PGR applications on the greens, and just trying to peak the course for the event. So that was the first thing. And
that's a challenge in itself, getting timing right, isn't it? It's a challenge in itself. People might not realise that there's a bit of timing involved in, like you said, lining up all your ducks to get it to fall so that it is as perfect as possible when that event's on.
100%. And then, the event itself, in terms of planning, we had quite a few volunteers, and that's another good thing about this industry and networking, is that I called in, a few favours, and guys were more than happy to send guys for a day or two, a morning or two, to come and help us. But
that's
trying
great.
To coordinate sort of, at times 15 guys instead of the usual 9 guys, and trying to pair up our guys with the volunteers so that they knew where they were going and the like, because you're working at 4:30 in the morning. It's dark and they've never been to Cranbourne before, but just trying to make sure everything flowed properly and the courses were presented the best they could be. That was not a headache, but it was challenging. But at the end of the day, to have an event like the Oz Amateur, which is one of the premier amateur golf events in the country, was a fantastic event to have. And I was really proud of the guys. Huge credit to all of them for how they stood up and worked the event, and they made it a lot less stressful for me as a first-time superintendent. But thoroughly enjoyed it.
Mate, that's fantastic to hear, and that everyone gelled, everyone was rowing in the same direction. It's all those things are important. The team working cohesively. You've got new members, volunteers, members of the team for that short period of time. People that aren't involved in the club. There are other professionals as well, so they jumped on board. They dropped and slotted into the team nicely, and all those things are important. But it's all a pretty big challenge to pull it all together. First time around for you, a couple of months into the role. Did you have any sleepless nights there, mate, leading up to it? I don't know what the weather was like.
Thankfully, it was sort of the last week of March, first week of April. So probably a week before the event, we were still pretty stressed from the weather, but it sort of dropped off. And the week of the event, we sort of were like 20, 21 degrees. So it was perfect weather for the event. But yeah, certainly leading up, I had quite a few sleepless nights, worrying about greens and worrying about what's going to be like if it's hot, et cetera, et cetera. But the weather really turned it on for us the week of the event.
And well, that makes it easier, certainly for the during the event. But I'm curious, with an event like that, and I don't know, I've not set up tournaments before. I've never worked as part of tournament prep either. I'm curious, as we hear about some of the things on the big events, international events around the place, where there's certain criteria that are sort of put on the golf course to be set up in a certain way, that greens need to be like this, and they need to sort of run out this pace and be like that. With an Oz Amateur, where does that sit in terms of being sort of given a set of criteria to present the course at, or was it just just present it the best that Cranbourne can be presented? Or was there certain, that's what I'm saying, was there certain things that you had to tick?
Yeah, no. So I met with Golf Australia probably every couple of weeks leading into the event. Trevor Herden, who's been doing the job for years and years, sort of gave me a few stipulations on what was expected of the event. It is an amateur golfing event, a lot of young golfers. So sort of the emphasis was on, he doesn't want the greens running out at 14 feet and making it too difficult for them. So for the event, we had them at about 12 feet most days on the stimp meter. In terms of preparation, as long as we sort of, prepped the bunkers, which was a full prep, full broom and hand rake every day. We cut and rolled the greens every day. And yeah, obviously we didn't use the irrigation system throughout the week, but we were hand watering spots in the afternoon. We were cutting fairways in the afternoon, sort of alternating 1-9 each day. And we were cutting tees every second day as well.
So, but there you go. So it's kind of good to hear they didn't want them at 15s with balls. If people walk past the air that moves around your body, push the ball off the green or something ridiculous like that. I have my thought process is that the modern golfer greens are way too quick for tournament setup. I think it's absurd. That's just my opinion. It's good to hear around that sort of 12 mark. I think that's a great speed. The most I could get out of my greens was 10 because they were really old and quite steep. And if we got over 10, balls wouldn't come to rest on certain slopes. So you couldn't do it. But 12 is, and not knowing the side, I think that's really good for a high level event, certainly for amateurs. I think probably for anyone, to be honest. But interesting that there is that criteria. And I don't know that people realise, and we talk about 12s and 15s, and for golfers, that's on a stimp meter, which is a measuring device of how far a ball will roll until it comes to rest from an angled release point up a ramp, a sort of an aluminium ramp, if you like. So it just gives us an idea of how far the ball will roll, and it's a specific device that's uniform across the planet that everyone uses. So if you hear them talk about it on television, they run it at 15. That's a stupid number in my opinion, but we do hear that quite regularly. Anywhere from 12s to 15s and thereabouts is great tournament speed. It's certainly fast, but there is that criteria. There is pressure to deliver that sort of stuff, isn't there, mate? I mean, how did that? Like I said, this is your first time roll, and you got people telling you to, hey, make it like this. This is what we need. We're expecting this.
I think you've just got to trust your processes and your programs and back yourself in that you know what you're doing, and theoretically things will work out the way that you intend them to. So maybe this is a flaw, maybe it's a positive environment, but I am a pretty cruisy person and I tend not to dwell on things too much. So,
well, mate, that's a positive. If you can be a superintendent and have that mind, honestly, if you can have that mindset as a superintendent, that's going to take you you're going to have a long career, mate. I've got to tell you, because you're not going to have I can't use that word. You're not going to have a head. I'll skip that one. Yeah. You're going to have a more... a less pressured time as a superintendent if you cannot take all those things on board to heart all the time. And I found it difficult, and I can speak for myself. I put too much pressure on myself at certain times to deliver certain things, and you do have lots of sleepless nights. Mate, it's if you can have that mentality as a superintendent, I think that's probably a key to a long career, mate. There you go. You might have found a little secret there.
Well, nothing's gone wrong yet.
But you have been in the role. After you've been in the role for a few more years, mate, I'll probably come back and ask you the same question.
It'll grind me down eventually.
You'll be 33 years old and a full head of grey hair. But now, it's interesting to hear you say you didn't use the irrigation for that 4 days, and it was hand watering, a very precise way of watering and delivering water to certain areas that need it. Across the 4 days of the event, I think it was 4, did they firm up and get firmer and firmer each day that wore on as the rolling and cutting went after each day?
Yeah, absolutely. And then come the final day of the event, which was a Friday, the wind also got up. And I think the leader for the men, he dropped about 8 shots in the final
Whoa.
day. And yeah, so potentially the roll wasn't required on the last day, but yeah, the winds got up and sort of the weather was about between 20 and 25 degrees most days. So
Yep.
yeah, there were certainly some dry spots around, and the greens definitely did firm up. But I think that's sort of what you want.
Yeah, and that's
throughout a tournament anyway.
And that's Sandbelt. That's Sandbelt golf. And if you know, that's part of understanding that environment. And I talk about if you're a travel golfer, your game gets better because you experience more things and you learn your game around that and how to play golf on different environments. Golf is not meant to be a one-dimensional game. Far from, and that's why it's an outside sport, and we play in all different conditions. And I hate playing in the rain, but that's one of them. But and I struggle in the wind, and that's another one. But that's just me personally. But these are all the things that factor to determining who is the best in that event. Is that it's different. It's a changing environment, and you have to deal with it on each day. It's not going to be the same. So it's not meant to be uniform. And I think the more people that understand that, I think the better off we are as well. Is that it's not meant to be the same every day.
Yep, absolutely.
I digress. I get a bit frustrated when people say it wasn't the same as it was last year. It's not meant to be, so get your head around it. One of the things I want to ask you, and look, congratulations on delivering a golf course with the team, and congratulations to the team as well and the club for delivering what was a great OzAm, and seeing some of the scores and watching some of that unfold online. I think it looked like it was well received, and it's certainly a well played event. So congratulations, mate.
Thank you very much.
One of the questions I got, I go back to fairways and I go back to Santa Ana Cooch, is my favourite. I'm curious down there with you guys on the Sandbelt, and you've got a drier summertime than we do here in Sydney, which means that you're going to get a better result and a better surface out of your Santa Anas down there. Do you have to do much by way of thinning them out throughout the year? I mean, do you scarify them much? Is it a once a year process? Is that I'm a believer. You've got to keep them thinned out because it's a very aggressive grass in the right growing conditions. What's it like? How do you do that down there? Is that a key?
Well, as I've sort of said, I haven't been in the role that long, but my intention is to renovate as best as practicable for the members and the events that are on. But obviously at clubs that I've been at previous, we've scarified and circle cut, really trying to dig into that grain and thin them out, as you said. And at Cranbourne, we'll work out a plan sort of throughout the year this year. And but my intention would be to scarify or verti cut the fairways. And I'm a big believer in using a lot of PGRs on the Santa Ana. It gets rid of that purpley seed head and it really tightens them up as well.
No, mate, that's very good to hear. You've already got your plan set for the growing season ahead after we get out of the cold. So I'm sure you're across it, and the team, you and the team, will be able to formulate what will be able to bring the best out in the golf course. It's been great listening to you, Nico. It's been great to hear where you've come from. Certainly, you've got a lot of experience down there in Melbourne. I think that's fantastic that you've got such great experience on a few different courses around there, and they're wonderful golf courses, Sorrento. And look, I won't name drop and take that away from you. I'll let you.
No, leave that to me.
No, mate, I'm taking I'm having a little bit of fun with it. But that's great experience. A lot of those ones that you've been working at, and great teams to be part of. Great insight to Cranbourne, mate, and I appreciate you doing so because I think that gives people a bit of interest. Certainly they can join a few more dots when they go down there and really understand a little bit more about why they experience a certain thing down at a place like Cranbourne. So if anyone's going to go down there and visit now, hopefully you'll be able to understand a little bit more of the golf course. And we've heard about the turf surfaces and the putting surfaces and things like that around the place and the environment that it's in. So it's another one of the great, probably lesser spoken of Melbourne Sandbelt courses, but certainly one that's held in high regard. You just heard that they've had the Australian Amateur there recently, and it was a great success. So it's only going to get better under you, Nick, and driving that team and having that team around you is key. And I think it's a great thing moving forward for the club and the golf course, mate. And I really appreciate your insight and telling us a bit about your career along the way.
Thank you so much for having me on, Steve. As I said, I'm a bit of a nerd, a bit of an avid listener of the podcast. So I was certainly very excited when you asked me to I'm on a note. I hope I've done it justice.
No, mate, I'm sure you have indeed. So, mate, Nico, thank you very much for being on the latest segment of Keeper of the Greens on the Golf and Greenkeeper podcast. I really appreciate your time and insight, mate, and I look forward to following your career a little bit more and certainly down there at Cranbourne and watching the golf course improve. Thanks, mate.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Nico Douglas, the new superintendent down at Cranbourne in Victoria, just on the outskirts of Melbourne, down the in the Sandbelt. Like I mentioned, the southeastern reaches of the Melbourne Sandbelt. I think I've got that right. You heard me messing around a few times, Cranbourne, so hopefully I've got that pronunciation correct finally. And thanks to Nico for his time. Really appreciated the conversation. Hopefully it gives you guys a bit of an insight into a bit of what goes on down there at Cranbourne, and certainly the characteristics of the golf course and what goes on in maintaining that space, and how Nico is bringing it all together with his team there, and what a baptism of fire there with the Australian Amateur that he held just a number of weeks ago now, and did so well doing so, bringing the course presentation right up there for an event, for his first major event as a superintendent, as a new superintendent. And that's a big deal, people, I'm here to tell you. So thanks to Nico for his time and insight, a wonderful thing. And look, if you do get the opportunity, and I say this about every superintendent, any greenkeeper that I have a conversation with about the golf courses that they're working on with their teams, if you get an opportunity to go down there and play Cranbourne, if indeed any of the other golf courses of the greenkeepers that I've spoken to as part of Keeper of the Green segment, you're going to get an insight, like I mentioned, and hopefully it'll give you a bit more of an understanding about the golf course you're going to play. So I've got no doubt if you get down there to Cranbourne, you'll really enjoy your time down there. Look out for some of those things that you heard us talk about with the different characteristics from the front nine to the back nine, heavier soils on the front, a bit more of the taller timber. You move to the back nine with the sandier soils and a little bit more movement in the ground and things like that. See if you can pick the conditioning differences that might also be some of the characteristics in the fairways, for example, which is often the ones because it's not a built profile. The grass is basically growing in the existing soil, which is usually what happens around golf courses that are about that age. So next time you play, just have a little bit of a look and feel about some of those characteristics there and see what your thoughts are. But as I said, and I keep saying, great insight. Thanks again to Nico. Now, guys, I will say please like, share, subscribe. As always, please pass it around to friends, to people you think might be interested in, and please leave me a comment. I love comments and reviews and things like that. Reviews are great in helping share the podcast around. So if you could please do that, that would be wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time out to listen once again to Keeper of the Greens. It's a great segment. I really enjoy doing it, and so do the superintendents and the greenkeepers that I'm talking to. You can hear in their voice how much they enjoy just sort of having a chat and talking about the inner workings of their golf courses and what goes on in maintaining it. So, and it's their job to showcase it. That's what we as greenkeepers do. We love doing it, and I love bringing more and more conversations to you guys, the audience out there, and I do appreciate you listening. A final word from my sponsor, Colin Campbell Chemicals, bringing you Keeper of the Greens. So fantastic to have them on board. Don't forget about their Behind the Turf podcast, which is a bit more of the education side into greenkeeping, a great deal of knowledge, a little bit more of the science behind it in the agronomy side as well, and so there's some good conversations. If you're interested in those sorts of topics, you will enjoy it, and you can search for that on some of your favourite podcast apps. And in the lead up, I know it's the end of May, but in the lead up to the end of June, for those greenkeepers of you out there, don't forget about the ASTMA conference that's happening down in Melbourne this year. And Colin Campbell Chemicals will have a stand at the trade show down there, so make a point of catching up with Nadeem and the team that are down at Colin Campbell Chemicals there in the stand of the trade show. You will know more about them when you go and visit them, obviously, and I hope you go and say good day. Take the time out to say good day to our friends and our sponsors of Keeper of the Greens. Now, that's a final word from me, guys. As I always say, you hit them clean, we'll keep them green, and I look forward to coming back to you very soon with another new episode of the podcast.